The space station shook again as another enemy blast hit its shields. Commander Zexai gripped the metal rail with his long fingers and watched the lights flicker above him. His people, the Alterians, had lived in peace for thousands of years. They were not fighters by nature, but the war had come to them anyway. Outside the thick windows, space was full of fire and death. Coalition ships tried to fight back against the enemy, but there were too many Vorthon vessels. Every few minutes, another friendly ship exploded in a ball of orange flame. Each explosion meant hundreds of good soldiers were gone forever. Zexai had been in command of Kepler Defense Station for 2 years. He had watched the war get worse and worse. The Vorthons were like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. They were so reptile-like creatures who had replaced parts of their bodies with machines. They felt no mercy. They showed no fear. They only wanted to conquer and destroy. Captain Veltar walked up to Zexai with heavy steps. The Gorian was twice as tall as most other beings and had 4 strong arms. His skin looked like living crystal that changed colors based on his mood. Right now it was a dark red that meant anger and sadness. "Sir, the scouts are back," Veltar said in his deep voice. His words came through a small device that changed his language into something Zexai could understand. "The main enemy fleet will be here in 6 hours." Zexai felt his heart sink. How many ships? More than 100,000 battle cruisers, plus their big siege platforms that can destroy whole planets. The numbers were too big to really understand. Zexai looked at his own fleet on the display screen. Less than 2,000 ships remained. Most were damaged, many were running out of fuel and ammunition. And how many soldiers do we have left? Veltar's crystal skin turned darker. Maybe 50,000 across all our ships. The enemy has millions. Down. In the medical section of the station, Dr. Linsa worked on wounded soldiers. She was from a race that looked like large insects but was very smart and kind. Her 6 hands moved quickly as she tried to save a young crystalline warrior who had been burned by enemy fire. Linsa had seen so many different species fight together in this war. There were the bird-like Avarans who were great pilots, the rock-hard stonemen who never gave up, the energy beings called Luminals who could fix almost any machine, all of them fighting together against the Vorthons. She remembered reading about a species called humans in the old computer files. They lived in a system called Sol, far away from the main battle zones. The file said they were supposed to join the coalition soon, but no one had heard from them in months. The Vorthons had probably killed them all, like they did to so many others. Back on the command bridge, Zexai stared at the tactical display. Red dots showed enemy ships moving toward them like a red flood. Each red dot was a warship that could level cities. The few green dots that showed coalition ships looked tiny and helpless. "Sir," said Lieutenant Kixera, a young Alterian female who handled communications. "We're getting reports from the refugee ships. They need more time to reach the safe zone." Zexai nodded slowly. That was why they were here. Not to win because winning was impossible. They were here to buy time for millions of civilian families to escape to the far edge of the galaxy where the Vorthons might not follow. "All ships, this is Commander Zexai." He spoke into his communicator. His words went out to every coalition vessel in the area. "We all know what we face today. We cannot win this battle, but we can make our deaths count for something. Every minute we hold this position is another 1,000 innocent lives saved." Around the bridge, crew members from a dozen different species nodded. They had made peace with dying today. What mattered was making it mean something. The first wave of Vorthon ships came into weapons range. Space lit up with laser beams and missile trails. The coalition ships fought back with everything they had, but their weapons seemed small against such a huge enemy force. A Vorthon cruiser exploded when 3 coalition fighters hit it at the same time, but for every enemy ship destroyed, 5 more took its place. The math was simple and cruel. Zexai watched a group of Avaran pilots make a suicide run at a Vorthon command ship. They managed to damage it badly before their own ships were destroyed. Brave birds, he thought. They died like heroes. Hull breach on deck 7. reported a technician. "Emergency teams are responding." The station shook again, harder this time. Lights went out in some sections. The shields were failing under the constant attack. "Sir," Veltar said quietly, "maybe we should consider surrender. Save the lives of our remaining people." Zexai looked at his friend and fellow commander. "You know the Vorthons don't take prisoners. They either kill you or turn you into one of them. Those are the only choices they give." It was true. The enemy didn't just want to win the war, they wanted to erase every other form of life in the galaxy. They saw all other species as inferior and deserving only death or slavery. Another coalition cruiser exploded in the distance, then another. The defensive line was breaking apart piece by piece. "All stations prepare for final assault," Zexai announced. "Make every shot count for the coalition, for our families, for all free life in the galaxy." The crew worked at their stations with grim determination. They loaded the last of their weapons. They redirected all power to shields and guns. They prepared to sell their lives as dearly as possible. But high above the battle, something small was falling through the atmosphere of the planet below. Something that would change everything. Though no one knew it yet, help was coming from the most unexpected place of all. Far above the space battle, a small metal object broke through the upper air of Nexus Prime. It was much smaller than the huge warships fighting each other in space. Most people would not have noticed it at all. But this small object was about to change everything. The drop pod burned bright red as it fell through the thick air. The metal shell grew so hot it started to glow like a small star. Inside the pod, Staff Sergeant Jake Collins checked his gear one more time. He was 32 years old and came from a place called Texas on Earth. He had thick brown hair and calm blue eyes that had seen many battles. Jake had been asleep in a special freezing chamber for 8 months. The Earth military had shot his pod toward this part of space just before the enemy attacked his home system. His mission was simple: find out what the enemy was doing and try to contact any friendly forces still fighting. But what Jake saw through his pod's small window made his blood turn cold. The battle in space was clearly hopeless. Thousands of enemy ships were destroying the much smaller group of good guys. It looked like he was too late to help anyone. The drop pod hit the ground with a terrible crash. The impact shook Jake's whole body even though his special armor protected him. His heads-up display showed that most of his equipment was still working. The Mark 7 armor he wore was the best that Earth could make. It had been built using lessons learned from hundreds of years of human warfare. Jake pushed open the pod's door and stepped out onto the alien world. Nexus Prime had once been beautiful, with cities that looked like they were made of crystal and light. Now those cities were broken ruins. Smoke rose from burning buildings everywhere he looked. In the distance, Jake could see enemy ground forces moving across the land. Their walking tanks moved on metal legs like giant spiders. Flying platforms carried enemy soldiers through the air. They were destroying everything in their path with cold efficiency. Jake turned on his long-range radio and tried to contact someone, anyone, who might be fighting the enemy. After several tries, a voice answered in accented but clear English. "Unknown contact, this is Commander Zexai of the Coalition Defense Force. Tell me who you are right now." Jake smiled a little. At least someone was still alive and fighting. "Commander, this is Staff Sergeant Jake Collins, United Earth Defense Force. I'm on the surface of Nexus Prime and ready to help however I can." There was a long pause. Jake could hear weapon fire and explosions in the background of the radio signal. "Human?" the voice said with surprise. "We thought your species was dead. The Vorthons told everyone they had destroyed your entire home system." Jake felt anger rise in his chest. The enemy had attacked Earth, his home, his family. "Well, sir, they missed one of us. What do you need me to do?" Another pause. "Sergeant Collins, I must be honest with you. We are losing this battle badly. We have maybe 6 hours before we are all dead. There is nothing one soldier can do to change that." Jake looked around at the destroyed landscape. He saw enemy forces moving in organized groups toward what looked like the last defended area of the planet. Standard military procedure would be to find a safe place to hide and wait for rescue. But Jake was not standard military. "Sir, with respect, I didn't come all this way to hide in a hole. Send me the locations of enemy positions, I'll see what I can do." "Sergeant, there are thousands of enemy soldiers down there. You would be one man against an army." Jake checked his weapons. His rail rifle was fully loaded with armor-piercing rounds that could punch through almost anything. His armor had systems that could make him nearly invisible, and he had something else that the enemy did not understand yet. "Commander, humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We've learned a few tricks along the way. Just give me those target locations." The radio crackled as data flowed into Jake's armor computer. Positions of enemy units, patrol routes, supply lines, command posts. Jake studied the information carefully. The enemy was moving in very predictable patterns. They were efficient, but they were not creative. "Sergeant Collins," Commander Zexai's voice came through the radio again. "I am sending you this data, but I want you to know that no one expects you to perform miracles. If you can gather intelligence and stay alive, that would be enough." Jake activated his armor's camouflage system. The advanced technology made him blend into the background like a ghost. "Sir, I appreciate the concern, but where I come from, we don't believe in impossible odds. We just believe in making the other guy's day worse than ours." He started moving toward the nearest enemy position, staying low and using the broken buildings for cover. His armor's sensors showed him everything around him: heat signatures, movement patterns, weak points in enemy defenses. The first group of Vorthan soldiers never saw him coming. Jake's rail rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed off the ruined buildings. The depleted uranium round punched clean through the enemy's armor. Before the other soldiers could react, Jake had moved to a new position and fired again. Up in space, Commander Zexai watched his tactical display with growing amazement. A single contact signature was moving through enemy positions like a force of nature. Enemy units were going dark one after another. "Sir," Lieutenant Kixra reported, "the human has eliminated an entire enemy patrol. 12 soldiers in less than 5 minutes." Zexai shook his head in disbelief. "One human soldier is doing this?" Dr. Linsa had been listening to the radio. Chatter. "Commander, I'm monitoring the human's vital signs through his radio signal. His heart rate and adrenaline levels are extremely high, but he seems to be functioning perfectly. This is not normal for most species." Captain Veltar studied the tactical data. "He's using hit-and-run tactics: strike fast, move position, strike again. Very effective against enemies who are not expecting it." On the surface, Jake was already moving toward his next target. He had counted the enemy's response time. He knew how fast they could communicate with each other. He was staying one step ahead of their reaction speed. "Coalition Command, this is Collins," he spoke into his radio as he reloaded his weapon. "I'm painting targets for you. If you have any big guns left up there, I can guide your fire." "Negative, Sergeant. All our ships are busy fighting for their lives. You're on your own down there." Jake grinned as he spotted another enemy position. "Copy that, Command. Collins out." He had expected to be alone in this. Humans had learned long ago that sometimes you had to fight by yourself, but they had also learned that one determined fighter could sometimes accomplish what whole armies could not. The war was about to change. The enemy just didn't know it yet. Commander Zexai could not believe what he was seeing on his tactical display. The small green dot that showed the human soldier was moving through enemy positions like lightning. Red dots that marked Vorthan forces kept disappearing from his screen one by one. "Sir," Lieutenant Kixra called out with excitement in her voice, "the human has destroyed 47 enemy vehicles in just 18 minutes. An entire mechanized company is gone." On the surface of Nexus Prime, Jake moved through the ruins of what had once been the capital city. His armor's special camouflage made him nearly invisible against the broken concrete and twisted metal. The rail rifle in his hands had become like an extension of his body. Every shot found its target. But Jake was not just using superior weapons. He was using something that humans had learned over thousands of years of fighting each other. He was using his brain. The Vorthans moved in straight lines and followed the same patterns over and over. They were like machines, predictable and rigid. Jake crouched behind a fallen statue and watched an enemy patrol walk past. 20 Vorthon soldiers in powered armor, moving in perfect formation. Any other species would have seen this as a hopeless fight. 20 against 1 was suicide. But Jake saw it differently. He activated a small device from his belt and threw it into the middle of the patrol. The sonic grenade exploded with a sound that scrambled the enemy's electronic systems. The patrol stumbled around blind and deaf. Jake picked them off one by one before moving to a new position. The remaining Vorthons tried to follow him, but Jake had already disappeared into the maze of ruined buildings. He knew every hiding spot, every good firing position, every escape route. He had studied the city layout during his descent and memorized it all. Up in space, Captain Veltar watched the battle with growing amazement. "Commander, I have studied warfare for 200 years. I have never seen anything like this. How is one soldier doing so much damage?" Dr. Linsa had been monitoring Jake's radio signals and vital signs. His body chemistry is fascinating. Most species would have collapsed from exhaustion by now, but humans seem to get stronger when they face danger. Their adrenaline system is unlike anything I have seen. Jake's next target was bigger. A Vorthan command post had been set up in what used to be a government building. 50 enemy soldiers guarded it, along with several heavy tanks. Jake studied the position for 20 minutes looking for weaknesses. He found them. The Vorthons had placed their guards in logical positions, but they had not considered that someone might attack from above. Jake used his armor's climbing gear to scale a nearby building. From the rooftop, he had a perfect view of the entire enemy position. Jake pulled out a different weapon. The plasma launcher was heavy and had limited ammunition, but it could punch through tank armor. He aimed carefully and fired. The first tank exploded in a ball of fire. Before the enemy could react, Jake had destroyed 2 more tanks and disappeared back into the building. The Vorthon soldiers ran around in confusion, looking for an enemy they could not see. Jake was already 3 buildings away, setting up his next attack. He had learned long ago that the key to fighting a bigger enemy was never to fight fair. Hit them where they were weak, then run away before they could hit back. "Coalition Command, this is Collins," Jake spoke into his radio as he reloaded his weapons. "I'm looking at enemy supply convoys moving toward the front lines. If I can cut their supply lines, their advance will slow down." "Sergeant Collins," Commander Zexhai replied, "our sensors show you have been fighting continuously for 6 hours. Don't you need rest?" Jake smiled grimly as he watched another enemy convoy approach. "Sir, I'll rest when the job is done. Besides, I'm just getting warmed up." What the coalition forces did not understand was that humans had evolved differently than most species. On Earth, humans had been persistence hunters. They chased prey for days without stopping until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. That same drive now made Jake nearly unstoppable in combat. Jake set up an ambush for the supply convoy. He planted explosive charges along the road and waited in a building overlooking the kill zone. When the enemy vehicles entered the trap, Jake triggered the explosives. The road erupted in fire and smoke. Enemy soldiers poured out of the surviving vehicles, but Jake was ready for them. His rail rifle spoke again and again, each shot taking down another Vorthon warrior. In less than 5 minutes, the entire convoy was destroyed. But Jake was not done. He searched through the wreckage and found something valuable. Enemy communication, equipment that was still working. Jake plugged his armor's computer into the device and began downloading enemy data. "Holy shit," Jake whispered as he read through the enemy files. He had found complete battle plans, troop positions, and command codes. This information could change everything. "Coalition Command, I'm uploading critical intelligence data. Enemy fleet positions, shield frequencies, command protocols. Everything you need to hurt them bad." Up on the space station, Commander Zexhai watched the data stream across his screens. For the first time in months, he felt something like hope rising in his chest. "Sergeant Collins, this intelligence is incredibly valuable, but our fleet is still vastly outnumbered. How can we use this information?" Jake looked out at the enemy forces still advancing across the planet. Thousands of Vorthon soldiers, hundreds of vehicles, dozens of aircraft. But now he knew their weaknesses. He knew how they thought and how they planned. "Sir, You've been fighting this war the wrong way. You're trying to match them ship for ship, but that's not how humans learn to win. When you can't beat them with strength, you beat them with cunning. Jake began transmitting a detailed battle plan that made the coalition commanders scratch, their heads in confusion. It involved hitting 17 different targets at exactly the right time to create a chain reaction of failures throughout the enemy formation. "This plan is insane," Captain Veltar said after reviewing it. "The timing has to be perfect or it will fail completely." "Captain," Jake's voice came through clearly despite the sound of explosions around him, "humans have a saying. Fortune favors the bold. You can die slowly playing it safe, or you can take a chance and maybe win this thing." The plan required Jake to infiltrate the main Vorthan command ship and disable their central computer at the exact moment the coalition fleet attacked. The chances of success were tiny. "Sergeant, that's a suicide mission," Dr. Linza protested. "No one could survive that." Jake checked his equipment one more time. His armor's power was running low and he was almost out of ammunition, but he had something the Vorthans could never understand. He had the human refusal to give up no matter how bad things looked. "Doc, where I come from, we have another saying. It ain't over till it's over. Just be ready to hit them when I give the signal." Jake began moving toward the enemy landing zone, where their command ships waited. The final phase of his impossible mission was about to begin. The main Vorthan fleet arrived to find chaos on the ground. General Thrakvar, the supreme commander of the invasion force, stared at his command screens with growing rage. His cybernetic implants sparked with electricity as his anger grew. "How is this possible?" Thrakvar hissed through his mechanical voice box. "A single enemy soldier has destroyed 3 entire divisions?" His subordinates stood around him in fear. The reptilian Vorthans were not used to failure. For 3 years they had swept across the galaxy like an unstoppable tide. No enemy had ever slowed them down like this. "Sir," one of his officers said nervously, "the reports are confirmed. 1 human soldier has neutralized over 2,000 of our ground forces. Our supply lines are cut. Our communication networks are compromised." Thrakvar's metal claws scraped against his command chair. "1 soldier impossible. Send everything we have after this human. I want him dead within the hour." On the surface of Nexus Prime, Jake crouched in the shadows of a ruined building. His armor was dented and scarred from hours of fighting. Smoke rose from dozens of burning Vorthan vehicles behind him, but he was not done yet. Jake had spent the last 2 hours gathering intelligence and sabotaging enemy positions. He had learned how the Vorthans thought and fought. They were efficient and powerful, but they were not creative. They followed patterns and procedures without thinking about other possibilities. "Coalition Command, this is Collins." Jake spoke into his radio while checking his remaining ammunition. "I've got complete enemy tactical data uploading now. Fleet positions, shield frequencies, command codes, the works." Up on Kepler Defense Station, Commander Zexhai watched the precious intelligence data flow across his screens. The information was incredibly detailed. It showed every weakness in the enemy formation. "Sergeant Collins, this intelligence could change everything," Zexhai said with excitement. "But we still face impossible odds. They have 100,000 ships to our 2,000. Jake studied the enemy landing zone through his armor's long-range sensors. Massive Vorthan command ships sat on the ground like metal mountains. Their shields glowed with energy. Their weapons tracked the sky, ready to destroy anything that came close. "Sir, you need to stop thinking like them," Jake said as he started, moving toward the enemy ships. "The Vorthans fight with brute force because they've never had to be clever. But humans learned something different. When you can't win with strength, you win with your brain." Jake transmitted his battle plan to the coalition fleet. It was complex and dangerous. The plan required perfect timing across 17 different attack points. If any part of it failed, the whole thing would collapse. Captain Veltar studied the plan with his forearms crossed. "This is madness, Sergeant. The margin for error is 0. 1 mistake and we all die." "Captain," Jake replied as he avoided another enemy patrol, "every plan has risks, but right now, you're going to lose. Anyway, if you keep fighting the same way, at least this gives you a chance." The plan was simple in concept but hard to execute. While the Coalition fleet made coordinated strikes on specific targets, Jake would infiltrate the main Vorthon command ship and disable their central computer. Without their command network, the enemy fleet would fall into chaos. Dr. Linsa had been monitoring Jake's vital signs throughout the battle. "Sergeant, your body has been running on maximum stress for 8 hours. Most beings would have collapsed by now. How are you still fighting?" Jake smiled grimly as he reached the edge of the enemy landing zone. "Doc, humans evolved as persistence hunters. We chased our prey until it dropped from exhaustion. That same drive keeps us going when others would quit." The Vorthon command ship loomed ahead of him like a metal cliff. It was 500 meters, long and bristled with weapons. Hundreds of enemy soldiers guarded it. Getting inside seemed impossible. But Jake had studied the ship's design while downloading their technical data. Like everything else the Vorthons built, it followed logical patterns. They had maintenance shafts, service corridors, and emergency exits. They just never expected anyone to be crazy enough to use them. Jake activated his armor's stealth systems and began his approach. The camouflage technology made him nearly invisible, but it drained his power cells quickly. He would have maybe 30 minutes before his armor shut down completely. "All Coalition ships, this is Collins," Jake whispered into his radio as he reached the ship's hull. "I'm beginning infiltration of the enemy command vessel. Wait for my signal before you attack." "Sergeant," Commander Zexai's voice was tight with worry. "If this fails, you will be trapped inside that ship with no way out." Jake found a maintenance hatch and began working on its electronic lock. His armor's hacking systems were some of the most advanced that Earth had ever created. "Sir, sometimes you have to take risks to win. My whole species learned that lesson the hard way." The lock clicked open. Jake slipped inside the enemy ship and found himself in a narrow service tunnel. The air was hot and smelled of metal and oil. He could hear the sound of alien voices and machinery all around him. Jake moved through the tunnel system like a ghost. His armor's sensors showed him the layout of the ship. The command center was 3 levels up and heavily guarded. But the ship's main computer core was 1 level down and had fewer guards. "Coalition fleet, I'm inside the target," Jake reported quietly. "Moving toward the computer core now. Be ready to attack on my signal." Up in space, every Coalition ship prepared for the desperate gamble. Gun crews loaded their weapons. Pilots strapped themselves into their fighters. Engineers diverted all power to shields and engines. Jake reached the computer core and saw his target. The Vorthon central processor was a massive crystal structure, surrounded by cooling systems and data conduits. It controlled every aspect of the enemy fleet's operations. Jake pulled out his last plasma charge and set it against the main power coupling. The explosion would fry every computer system on the ship and send feedback through the entire fleet's network. "This is for Earth," Jake whispered as he armed the explosive device. But before he could trigger it, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Emergency lights flashed red. Jake heard the sound of heavy footsteps running toward his position. They had found him. Dozens of Vorthon soldiers were converging on the computer core. Jake had maybe 2 minutes before they broke through the sealed door he had locked behind him. Jake activated his radio one last time. "Coalition fleet, this is Collins. Execute the attack plan now. I'm about to light up their command systems." "Sergeant, wait," Commander Zexai called back. "We need more time to get into position." Jake could hear plasma torches cutting through the door. Sparks flew as the enemy tried to break in. He looked at the timer on his explosive device. 10 seconds until detonation. "Sorry, sir, but we're out of time," Jake said calmly. "Tell my people back home that I did my job. Coalition fleet, hit them with everything you've got. Now." Jake pressed the detonator button as the door behind him exploded inward. Vorthon soldiers poured into the room just as the plasma charge went off. The computer core erupted in a shower of sparks and flame. Throughout the enemy fleet, command systems failed. Navigation computers crashed. Communication networks went dark. Shield generators overloaded. The perfectly organized Vorthon formation began to fall apart as ships lost contact with each other. And at that exact moment, the Coalition fleet struck with deadly precision. The explosion threw Jake across the computer room like a rag doll. His armor sparked and smoked as he hit the metal wall. Emergency lights flashed red all around him. The massive computer core was now a twisted pile of burning crystal and metal. Jake struggled to his feet and checked his armor's status. Most systems were failing. His power was almost gone. But he had done what he came to do. The enemy's command network was destroyed. Through the smoke and flame, Jake could see Vorthen soldiers trying to get into the room. But the explosion had damaged the door systems. They were trapped on the other side, shouting in their alien language, "Up." In space, Commander Zexai watched his tactical display with amazement. The enemy fleet formation was falling apart. Ships that had moved in perfect order just minutes before were now crashing into each other. Some Vorthon vessels spun out of control. Others fired their weapons in random directions. "All ships, attack now," Zexai commanded. "Hit their command vessels while they're confused." The coalition fleet struck with deadly precision. Using Jake's intelligence data, they knew exactly which enemy ships to target first. Laser beams and missiles found their marks. Vorthon command. Cruisers exploded in balls of fire. Captain Veltar coordinated the attack from his battlecruiser. His crystal skin glowed bright blue with excitement. "Target their shield generators." Without central control, they can't coordinate their defenses. The battle that followed would be remembered for thousands of years. 2,000 coalition ships fought 100,000 Vorthon vessels and won through superior tactics and perfect timing. Enemy ships that had seemed invincible just hours before were now helpless without their command systems. Dr. Linza monitored the communications channels from her medical station. "Commander, we're receiving surrender signals from multiple enemy vessels. Their fleet is breaking apart." On the surface of Nexus Prime, Jake knew he had to get out of the command ship before it exploded completely. The computer core's destruction had started fires throughout the vessel. Soon the whole ship would be nothing but scrap metal. Jake found an emergency escape pod in a corridor filled with smoke. His damaged armor could barely keep him alive, but he managed to activate the pod's launch sequence. The small capsule shot out of the dying command ship just as its main reactor went critical. The explosion lit up the sky like a new sun. The massive Vorthon flagship broke apart in a chain of secondary explosions. Pieces of burning metal rained down across the battlefield. Jake's escape pod crashed into a pile of rubble several kilometers away. His armor's life support was failing. He could taste blood in his mouth, but he was alive, and more importantly, he could see coalition ships landing all around him. "This is Staff Sergeant Jake Collins," he spoke weakly into his radio. "I'm down, but alive. Could use a pickup." Within minutes, a coalition rescue team found him. Dr. Linza was among the first to reach Jake's position. The insectoid medic worked quickly with her 6 hands to stabilize his injuries. "How do you feel, Sergeant?" Dr. Linza asked as her medical scanners checked his vital signs. Jake managed a weak smile. "Like I got hit by a truck. But I'll live." "Did the plan work?" Commander Zexai's voice came through the radio with joy and disbelief. "Sergeant Collins, the enemy fleet is in full retreat. General Throckvar has requested peace negotiations. The war is over. You did it." The news spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. The Vorthon Empire, which had seemed unstoppable for 3 years, had been defeated by the combined courage of the coalition forces and one human soldier who refused to give up. In the days that followed, Jake recovered in a coalition medical facility. Representatives from dozens of species came to meet the human who had changed the course of galactic history. They wanted to understand what made his species so different. "How did you know your plan would work?" asked Captain Veltar during one visit. Jake sat up in his hospital bed and looked out the window at the rebuilding city below. "Honestly, Captain, I didn't know. But sometimes you have to take a leap of faith and hope for the best." The victory had cost much. Thousands of coalition soldiers had died in the final battle. Many worlds lay in ruins. The scars of war would take years to heal. But the galaxy was free again. Within weeks, peace negotiations began on the neutral world of Haven. The Vorthon Empire, facing their first major defeat in centuries, agreed to withdraw from all conquered territories. They would return to their home systems and leave the other species alone. General Thrakvar himself came to the peace talks. The cybernetic reptile looked at Jake with something that might have been respect. "You fought well, human," Thrakvar said through his mechanical voice box. "My people underestimated yours. We will not make that mistake again." Jake nodded politely. "General, I hope we never have to fight each other again. The galaxy is big enough for all of us." As the peace treaty was signed, news reached the ceremony. That changed everything. A fleet of ships had arrived from the Sol system. Earth had survived the Vorthon attack. Humanity was ready to join the galactic community. Jake was chosen as Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Coalition. Standing before the Council of Species, he delivered a simple message that would be remembered for generations. "My people send their greetings to the galaxy," Jake said to the assembled representatives. "We bring with us the most powerful weapon in the universe. Not advanced technology or superior firepower, but something much more dangerous to those who would oppress others. We bring hope." The audience of alien dignitaries listened in respectful silence. Hope that no matter how dark things get, there's always a chance to turn things around. Hope that good people working together can overcome any evil. Hope that freedom and justice will always find a way to survive. In the months that followed, human colonies began spreading across the galaxy. Earth's military shared their tactical knowledge with coalition forces. Human engineers worked alongside alien scientists to rebuild the war-torn worlds. But perhaps most importantly, the galaxy had learned that size and numbers were not everything. Sometimes, the smallest force could make the biggest difference. Sometimes one person willing to stand up and fight could change the fate of billions. Jake Collins returned to active duty with the newly formed Coalition Defense Force. He trained soldiers from dozens of species in human combat tactics. He taught them that victory was not just about having the best weapons or the most ships. "The real battle," Jake would tell his students, "is fought. In here," he would point to his head, "and in here," he would point to his heart. Never give up. Never surrender. And always remember that impossible just means nobody's tried hard enough yet." The human age of the galaxy had begun, and it started with one soldier who fell from the stars when hope seemed lost.